Black housemaid gets pregnant by a millionaire, and he fires her to hide his betrayal. But when his wife finds out, Emily Summers was a young, hard-working and kind woman who dedicated herself wholeheartedly to her job at the Worthington Mansion, a home that radiated luxury and high society influence. For her, each day in that vast property was a new experience, where the simplicity of her past clashed with the grandeur of her employer's world. Since she was hired, she had tried to remain invisible, carrying out her duties with discretion and efficiency, yet always feeling that she didn't belong in that world. She never imagined that one day her eyes would meet those of James Worthington, the charming and ambitious millionaire, or that he would somehow take an interest in someone like her. Before we continue, can you tell me where you're watching from? I'd love to know how far this story has reached. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to support us and not miss any updates. Let's dive into this emotional journey together. James Worthington was exactly what you'd expect from a man of his status: attractive, confident, and always surrounded by an aura of power that made him irresistible. Tall, with intensely blue eyes and a subtle smile that seemed to hide secrets, he was known not only for his business acumen, but also for his charm that captivated anyone who crossed his path. He had a stable relationship with Samantha Collins, an influential and equally ambitious lawyer, whose brilliance and sophistication perfectly matched the lifestyle he had built. Together, they were society's ideal couple, two powerful people who seemed destined to share a promising future. But deep down, James carried an unease. Despite the stable, planned relationship he had with Samantha, something in his life felt unfulfilled. In business, he was an impeccable strategist, but in his heart, he felt a void he couldn't quite understand. This void was unexpectedly filled by Emily's presence. He first noticed her while she tended the mansion's garden on a sunny morning, with her hair tied up casually and her delicate hands caring for the flowers. She was a breath of fresh air amid the rigid opulence around him, and this genuine simplicity was what attracted him. As the days passed, James found excuses to watch her from afar, fascinated by the grace in her walk, the gentle smile she offered everyone, and especially the calm that seemed to radiate from her. One afternoon, he finally approached her, calling her over for a conversation. She looked at him, surprised and flustered, trying not to show her nervousness. She never imagined that a man like him would want to speak with someone in her position. From that moment on, a series of unexpected encounters and exchanged glances became part of their routine, and Emily found herself strangely drawn in. James said sweet things to her, and gradually she began to allow herself to dream. He spoke of his frustrations, of how he sometimes felt suffocated by the weight of expectations, and with a vulnerability he shared only with her, he planted in her heart the idea that there might be a special place for her. Still, something deeply bothered her. She knew he was committed to Samantha, and that no matter how subtly he made promises, there was no guarantee he would fulfill any of them. Emily tried to ignore this doubt, telling herself that perhaps one day he would be willing to risk everything for them to be together. But deep down, doubt remained, causing a constant anxiety and the feeling that, no matter how much she gave, she would always be secondary in his life. As time passed, their encounters grew more frequent and intimate. Each time they were together, James showed a passion and affection that kept Emily's hopes alive. He made her feel special, enveloped in a feeling she never imagined she'd experience. But there were also moments of solitude when she would return to the modest room reserved for staff, staring at her reflection and wondering if she was being foolish to believe he would leave Samantha. There was a shadow that followed her, a foreboding that everything was fragile and unstable, and that she could lose it all at any moment. Despite her feelings, Emily knew she had no control over the situation. James belonged to a world with different rules, a world where she was just an employee, and Samantha, whom he claimed to love, was the woman he made plans with and shared social life, while she, Emily, was only the secret hidden in the mansion's shadows. These thoughts tortured her, but whenever James sought her out, her defenses crumbled. She allowed herself to live the romance, but fear and insecurity were already rooted in her heart. One particularly cold night, James surprised Emily as she was about to head home. He held her hand, looking into her eyes with an intensity that made her shiver. "Emily, you're the person who understands me. With you I feel free." His words were like honey, and Emily desperately wanted to believe them, but something inside her resisted. She knew that there were unspoken promises in that gaze, but where was the certainty he would keep them? Each gesture from James was a mix of affection and mystery, leaving her constantly in doubt. He spoke of his desire to be with her, but never addressed what that meant for their future. Emily tried to ignore her growing fear, but couldn't shake the thought that, at some point, he might change his mind and give it all up. Even in moments of passion, Samantha's shadow seemed to loom over them, reminding her that her happiness depended entirely on James's choices. The emotional strain began to take its toll on her. She felt torn between the joy of being with him and the fear that he'd never be able to take the ultimate step. Many nights after their encounters, she cried alone, trying to understand why she clung to a love that would likely destroy her. Does he truly love me? Or am I just a distraction? She wondered. Insecurity gripped her, and even in the tenderest moments, Emily couldn't ignore the feeling that maybe James never intended to choose her. Not truly. The relationship grew more complex by the day. James became increasingly divided, while Emily saw her hopes starting to crumble under the weight of doubt. She knew that continuing would bring inevitable pain, but she couldn't walk away from him. James was everything she had ever wanted, yet he also made her question her self-worth and her choices. Over time, doubt about the future became almost unbearable, and the shadow of heartbreak loomed over her, reminding her that, no matter how much she dreamed, she was in a disadvantaged position. Emily knew she was walking a dangerous path and sinking deeper into a love that would probably hurt her deeply. She loved James with an intensity that scared her, but she was also beginning to realize that her own worth didn't depend on being by his side. And despite being trapped in the relationship, deep down, seeds of insecurity and heartbreak were beginning to grow in her heart. The moment that changed Emily Summer's life came unexpectedly and painfully, like a blow she could never have anticipated. For weeks, she had been feeling different, experiencing unusual fatigue and slight dizziness every morning. Initially, she attributed it to exhaustion from work, the long days, and sleepless nights spent thinking about her future with James. She tried to convince herself that he would choose her, and that someday they would have a chance to build a life together, away from Samantha and the obligations of the Worthington world. But on a particularly difficult day, when her body seemed to give in to something deeper, Emily gathered the courage to take a test that revealed a devastating truth: she was pregnant. The revelation brought a mixture of feelings she could never fully explain. At first, she felt overwhelming dread, as if she were about to fall off a cliff with no idea what awaited at the bottom. She knew this pregnancy could change everything, that the presence of a child would bring a responsibility far greater than she had imagined. Yet at the same time, a spark of joy filled her heart. It was as if she finally had a piece of James with her, something that made everything feel more real and lasting. She spent days hiding the news, trying to find the best way to tell James. She clung to the hope that he would see in that child proof of a profound love, something that would make him finally choose her and start a life with her. Emily fantasized about James's reaction, imagining his words and gestures upon hearing about the life growing inside her. When she finally gathered the courage to tell him, she waited until late in the afternoon, at a time when she knew he would be alone in his office. Her heart raced with every step closer to an uncertain fate. Upon entering, she found James focused on a pile of papers, his expression serious and thoughtful, as if nothing in the world could disturb him. When he saw her, he looked up and offered a restrained smile, but quickly noticed the tension on her face. She approached him slowly, her hands trembling and her voice shaky, until she finally let slip the words that would forever change their lives. "James, I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was almost unbearable. James stared at her, his expression shifting between shock and disbelief. There was none of the joy that Emily had secretly hoped to find in his face. Instead, he seemed to withdraw from her, his eyes lost in dark thoughts. He stood up, walked to the window, and remained silent for long moments, staring out at the distant landscape, while Emily stood still, waiting for him to finally turn around and say something, anything. But when he spoke, his tone was cold and ruthless, as if she were a stranger. "Emily, this can't happen. This should never have happened." His words were like a knife, each one cutting deep into her heart. He looked at her with a coldness she had never seen before, as if her presence was an inconvenience, a problem to be eliminated. She tried to argue, to explain how much this baby meant to her, and she believed to him as well. But James remained unmoved, his expression firm and resolute. "I have a life planned. Samantha and I have plans. My reputation, my career. You don't understand how all this works, Emily. We can't have this child. It would ruin everything." With every word, Emily felt her world shattering. It wasn't just James' rejection that hurt her, but the way he seemed determined to deny the very existence of something she held sacred. She struggled to understand, to find some humanity in that gaze that had once been so tender. But there was nothing, just emptiness and contempt for something she held dear. Then he made a proposal that devastated her even more. He offered her a sum of money, enough for her to start a new life elsewhere, far from the mansion, far from him. Emily, stunned, heard those words like a punch to the stomach. He was buying her silence, trying to rid himself of her and the child she carried, as if they were nothing but obstacles in his way. For a moment, Emily refused to accept it. She tried to appeal to any compassion he might still have. "James, this is our child. He deserves love, deserves a father. And you always said you loved me." But he cut her off with an impatient gesture, looking away. "This was a mistake, Emily. A mistake that needs to be fixed." Those words echoed in her mind, each syllable a blow that repeated endlessly. The love she thought they had was, to him, just a mistake, something that needed to be forgotten and buried. She didn't know if she could bear the pain, but deep down she realized she was alone and would have to make a choice. With no more hope, Emily accepted the money he offered, took the envelope, and left the office without looking back, feeling empty and betrayed. As she left the mansion, the pain consumed her, making each step almost unbearable. She walked aimlessly, tears streaming down her face, trying to understand how the man she had fallen in love with, who had sworn to love her, could be so heartless. The image of James, unyielding in his decision, haunted her mind, destroying the sweet memories she had of him. Emily headed toward the train station, determined to leave behind everything she had known at the Worthington mansion. There, in the solitude of an unknown city, she promised herself she would never depend on someone like James again. She would be strong, for herself and for her child. But as she held that envelope, each bill felt like a cruel reminder of what she had lost. The dream of true love, the desire for a family, and the certainty that she would always be alone on her journey. As she boarded the train, Emily looked back one last time, facing the horizon with the pain of someone whose world had been destroyed. She knew that from that moment on, she would have to rebuild herself, facing the uncertainties of motherhood alone. But one thing was certain: she would never rely on James and his empty promises again. Emily arrived in the new city, carrying the weight of her past, but with the courage of someone who knew she would need to be strong for her child. The first days were difficult, full of uncertainties. She knew no one, had no support network, and faced the immense challenge of building a new life from scratch. Her first mission was to find a safe place to live with the baby growing inside her, a home where she could feel safe and protected, and where nothing reminded her of the pain she had endured at the Worthington mansion. With the little money left from James's cold and cruel payment, Emily rented a small apartment in a modest neighborhood. The place was simple, but brought her the peace she so desired. The neighborhood was made up of workers leading humble but honest lives, very different from the luxurious and cold reality she had left behind. Despite the hardships, that environment gave Emily a sense of belonging and dignity, something she hadn't felt in a long time. The early months of pregnancy were lonely and exhausting. Emily had to deal with the changes in her body and the emotional weight of her situation. She spent entire days in silence, talking only to the life growing inside her, as if little Noah, even before birth, was her only friend left. On the most desperate nights, she whispered words of love to her son, promising him a life filled with love and protection. "You will have everything I can give you, my dear. I will never abandon you," she whispered, trying to push away the memory of James and the devastating rejection. As the months passed, Emily had to look for a job. Pregnancy didn't give her time to recover from the trauma, and she quickly realized that the responsibility she bore demanded more of her than she had ever imagined. One rainy morning, she found a job posting in a small bakery in town, a modest yet welcoming place where customers were always greeted with smiles, and where Emily slowly began to feel like part of a family. The bakery owner, a kind lady named Margaret, was a compassionate woman who, noticing the loneliness in Emily's eyes, welcomed her and offered not only a job, but also words of support and understanding. Margaret became a motherly figure to Emily, standing by her throughout her pregnancy, and later becoming the first to meet Noah. When the boy was born, bringing new light to Emily's life, Margaret was one of the few who knew her story. Though still marked by pain, Emily found in Noah a strength she never believed she had. Holding him in her arms for the first time, she knew her life now had a clear purpose: to protect and love that boy, with all the intensity that James's absence had left in her heart. Years went by, and Noah grew up healthy and happy, bringing light to each of Emily's days. He was a cheerful and curious boy with a contagious energy and an innocence that charmed everyone around him. His deep blue eyes reflected his father's, and though this occasionally hurt Emily, she clung to the certainty that this love was hers alone. She decided early on that she would never tell Noah about his true father. He didn't need to know he was born of rejected love. For him, the world would be a safe place built with his mother's unconditional love. Emily taught Noah values of honesty, kindness, and compassion, hoping he would grow up different from his father. She always encouraged the boy to be kind and fair, even in his small games. Noah loved helping at the bakery, where he became a favorite among customers, and Margaret, who spoiled him as if he were her grandson. His presence brought joy to everyone, and Emily gradually found a sense of peace and fulfillment. Her days were now filled with laughter and play, with the bakery routine and the endless love she felt for Noah. The past, though it sometimes haunted her in weak moments, seemed less painful, and the future was no longer a dark weight on her shoulders. There were, however, inevitable moments of anxiety and insecurity. Sometimes, when watching Noah play with other boys, Emily wondered if he would feel the absence of a father figure. She tried hard to make sure he'd never feel this lack, but she knew that eventually questions would come. As she watched her son grow, she noticed the physical similarities he shared with James, the same mysterious smile, the expressive look, and the charming way that melted everyone around him. Those traits reminded her of the man who abandoned her, and in silence Emily tried to push away the guilt and pain, determined to never let these memories affect her love for Noah. Despite the adversities, Emily became a strong and resilient woman, very different from the vulnerable and dependent young woman who left the Worthington mansion. She became a dedicated mother, a loyal friend to Margaret, and a beloved figure in the community. Each little success, each of Noah's smiles was a victory over the past, yet deep in her soul, she carried a wound that might never fully heal. It was a silent reminder that, although she had moved on, part of her story remained unresolved. She feared that one day this secret would come to light, and that Noah might suffer from the weight of the choices she had been forced to make. But Emily remained steadfast in her decision to raise Noah alone. On the hardest days, she remembered the promises she made to the baby she carried, and those promises kept her strong. She loved him so deeply and intensely that her heart could barely bear it. She knew that nothing in the world could change what she felt for him, and this made her invincible. It was as if every tear she shed in the past had turned into courage to face the present. Years later, Emily and Noah became inseparable. He was an intelligent and sensitive boy, with a keen perception of his mother's emotions. Even without knowing the details, Noah sensed that Emily carried something within her that she didn't share with anyone. Some nights, when she thought he was already asleep, he would find her sitting in the living room, staring into space with a distant expression. At these times, he would silently approach her and hold her hand, as if he knew she needed support. Emily would hug him tightly, grateful for finding in her son's love the strength to overcome the ghosts of the past. Time had passed for everyone. Years had slipped away like sand through fingers since Emily left the Worthington mansion. The past now seemed like a distant memory, a wound that, though still present, lay quietly in her heart. The life she built with Noah and the small joys they shared became her foundation. Emily found peace in her simple routine and in the company at the bakery, and kept herself busy with her son's growth. Noah was now 6, a vibrant boy with deep eyes and a charming smile. Though he knew his father was absent, Noah never showed signs of feeling deprived of anything. To him, Emily was everything, and her devotion seemed enough for him to grow up happy and secure. But while Emily was rebuilding her life in a quiet, humble town, James Worthington was on a different path. Over the years, his empire had prospered even more, and he had become a powerful and influential figure in the business world. His marriage to Samantha Collins was talked about across the country, seen as a union of two of the most brilliant and ambitious minds in the American elite. Samantha was his companion at every event and trip. They worked side by side and displayed a mutual respect that further fueled the prestige of their union. They represented the perfect couple, two successful professionals who together seemed to have achieved all the dreams they had ever envisioned. When James and Samantha returned to that town in search of new expansion opportunities, Emily could never have imagined the reunion that fate was about to orchestrate. To her, it was a small town, far from the glitz and glamour that usually surrounded the Worthingtons' lives. so living there seemed like a safe shield, a guarantee that she would never see James again. On a typical afternoon, Noah was playing with other children in the town park, laughing and running with a liveliness that enchanted those watching. Emily watched from a nearby bench with a sweet and serene look. It was her small break from the bakery, and seeing Noah happy and free filled her with a pride that warmed her heart. She was so absorbed in the moment that she didn't notice the elegant couple passing through the park. James was about to keep walking, paying no attention to the park or the children playing, when his gaze was drawn to the boy with blue eyes and a mischievous smile running across the grass. The sight was like an unexpected blow, leaving him suddenly paralyzed. There was something about that boy that seemed absurdly familiar, like a reflection that reminded him of something hidden deep in his memory. He couldn't say exactly what it was, but something inside him compelled him to keep watching the boy with a growing unease. Samantha noticed James's discomfort and called out to him, but he remained still, his eyes fixed on the boy, as a mix of contradictory emotions consumed him. He knew that look, that smile, those expressions that no matter how he tried to avoid them, revealed something disturbingly familiar. Then, as if guided by fate, he saw Emily, sitting on a bench in the background, with a watchful and protective gaze over the boy. That sight was even more shocking than the boy himself. For a moment, time seemed to stop. He felt his heart race, overwhelmed by a wave of memories he thought he had overcome. The image of Emily, the woman who once ignited an overwhelming passion in him, now caring for a boy whom he was slowly beginning to suspect, was his son. James felt a dizziness, as if his secure, well-structured world was silently collapsing. Before Samantha could notice Emily's presence, he looked away and held his wife's hand, suggesting they continue their walk without further explanation. But his mind couldn't let go of the image of Emily, and especially that boy. It was impossible to ignore the truth that was beginning to insinuate itself into his heart. The resemblance was undeniable, and suspicion turned into an uncomfortable certainty. The boy could only be Noah, the son he had rejected years ago in an act of cowardice and coldness. That night James couldn't sleep. Beside Samantha he feigned calm, but his mind was consumed by questions. The image of Noah's face appeared repeatedly in his memory, bringing forth the guilt he thought he had buried. The weight of his past decision seemed to return with brutal force, like an unpaid debt that haunted him. He remembered every detail of the conversation in which he rejected Emily and the child, how he expelled them from his life, as if they were a mistake to be corrected. At the time, he made that decision believing his reputation and future depended on it, but now he found himself entangled in a whirlwind of emotions, where regret and remorse mixed with an uncontrollable desire to approach the boy. In the following days, James returned to the park several times, always watching from a distance, too afraid to approach directly. Each visit he watched Noah play with the other children, and saw in him a vitality and joy that reminded him of his own childhood. He recognized the gestures, the mannerisms, the intense gazes the boy cast around, and this only strengthened his certainty that Noah was indeed his son. But at the same time, he knew that the truth wasn't something he could simply reveal. How could he explain to Samantha that he had a son with another woman? How could he face the fact that he abandoned that child, only to find him years later without even having the right to approach him? The questions gnawed at him, and James began to act increasingly distant and introspective. Samantha, though busy with professional commitments, began to notice her husband's change in behavior. She knew him well, understood that something was deeply troubling him, but James, instead of confiding in her, remained silent, as if hiding a secret. The distance between them grew day by day, as he continued in secret his routine of watching Noah and Emily, seeking in those furtive moments a way to reconnect with something he once rejected. Gradually, the need to confront Emily became inevitable. James knew he couldn't continue like this, trapped between past and present, torn between his love for Samantha and the responsibility he felt toward Noah. On a cold afternoon, he gathered the courage, and while Samantha was involved in a meeting, went to the bakery where Emily worked, determined to get answers and perhaps find a kind of redemption he knew he would never deserve. When she saw him enter, Emily felt her blood freeze. The figure she once loved, and who caused her so much pain, was now standing before her, like a shadow from the past she had tried so hard to bury. She knew at that moment that this reunion would bring profound consequences for her life and Noah's. As he entered the bakery where Emily worked, James felt the weight of every step, the anxiety rising within him like a storm about to break. The smell of fresh bread, the murmurs of customers, and the clinking of cups were the only sounds in the environment, but all of it faded away under the intensity of the gaze he cast at Emily. She noticed him before any words were spoken. Her eyes immediately showed the fear and tension of someone facing a ghost from the past. When their eyes met, Emily knew the inevitable moment had finally come. James made a silent gesture, indicating that he needed to talk. Emily, her heart racing, nodded and asked Margaret for a moment, who noticed her employee's discomfort and pale complexion, but didn't press. They stepped out to the back of the bakery, where there was a small garden surrounded by bushes, a discreet and safe place where they could talk without interruption. The air was cold and sharp, reflecting what they both felt inside. James began to speak but hesitated. The words felt heavy, stuck in his throat. He wanted confirmation, but at the same time he knew that receiving an answer would bring a reality he wasn't prepared for. Finally, he took a deep breath and with a trembling voice said, "Emily, that boy, Noah, he is my son, isn't he?" The question hung in the air, loaded with anguish that made time seem to drag. Emily felt painful memories resurface, recalling all she had suffered, each tear shed, each night of loneliness and abandonment. She looked at him with an expression of pain and resentment that needed no words to be understood. Yet, with a low, bitter tone, she confirmed the truth he so feared. "Yes, James, Noah is your son, the same son you rejected, the same son who had to grow up without a father, because you decided that we were a mistake." Her words were sharp, filled with a bitterness that he knew he fully deserved. Emily described the weight of his decision, how she was left at the mercy of a world that judged her, how she had fought alone to raise Noah with dignity, never letting him feel the absence of someone who now showed up out of nowhere, wanting answers. Each word she spoke seemed to pierce James's soul, bringing with them an unbearable guilt. He listened in silence, without interruptions, absorbing each painful feeling she expressed, aware that the past couldn't be erased. He who once thought he could simply leave it all behind, now found himself face to face with the consequences of his own choices. Seeing Emily's suffering, he realized the damage his coldness had caused, and an anguish consumed him at the thought that the son he had rejected had grown up without ever knowing him. With a trembling sigh, James expressed his desire to make amends. "I know I can't undo the past, Emily. I made a mistake that will haunt me forever, but please let me get close to Noah. I want to know him, to be part of his life." Emily looked at him in disbelief, trying to understand how he, after all this time, could dare to ask for such a thing. To her, it felt like an insult, as if he believed his mere presence could make up for all they had endured. Yet Emily, knowing how important the bond with his father could be for Noah, hesitated. Although she wanted to protect her son from pain, a part of her felt that denying this connection might bring more suffering to Noah in the future. But she set a condition, her gaze serious and unyielding. "If you want to be part of Noah's life, James, you will have to tell Samantha the truth. He deserves a father, but he won't be the dirty secret you hide from your wife. If you want me to allow your presence in his life, then prove you can be honest, at least once." James nodded, but in his heart he knew he wasn't ready to tell Samantha the truth. The dilemma consumed him. His marriage was solid and, on the surface, happy. How could he risk all that? Still, the desire to connect with Noah grew stronger. He tried to uphold his promise, but at the same time, the fear of losing Samantha paralyzed his intentions. As he bid farewell to Emily, he promised himself he would find a way to approach Noah without Samantha knowing, at least for now. In the days that followed, James began a covert approach to Noah. He would encounter the boy casually at the park, starting light and friendly conversations. Unaware of who he really was, Noah quickly developed an affection for this friend who showed him attention and brought him little gifts. The connection between father and son grew naturally, and with each meeting, James felt the bond between them strengthen. Noah would show him drawings he made, talk about school and his games, without knowing that this man was in fact the father he had never met. Emily, watching from afar, felt a mix of emotions. Though she felt a slight satisfaction in seeing Noah smile in his father's company, her heart still held scars that made the scene painful. She questioned whether she was right to allow James into her son's life without telling Samantha the truth, but she hoped that eventually he would decide to come clean and face the consequences. However, days passed, and the promise he had made remained unfulfilled. Each encounter James had with Noah, each smile and hug, made the situation more unsustainable. He knew he was deceiving not only Samantha but also Noah, and the weight of this lie ate away at him. Still, he continued to keep his secret, fearing that revealing it would destroy everything he had built with Samantha. The guilt was constant, a burden that grew heavier by the day, but the fear of losing his marriage outweighed his desire to live honestly. In those moments of silence, alone in his office or beside Samantha, James felt the conflict growing inside him. Each encounter with Noah brought him closer to the truth, but at the same time, further from the courage needed to face it. He saw himself as a prisoner of his own lies, unable to find a way out that wouldn't cause pain to everyone involved. Each day, his conscience weighed more heavily, and he knew that sooner or later he would have to choose between his love for Samantha and his honesty with his son. And deep down, he feared that in the end he might lose both. Tension had been in the air for days, but Samantha couldn't pinpoint the exact source of the unease growing between her and James. He was increasingly distracted, distant, and his discomfort was obvious. In a marriage as solid and trusting as theirs, any sign of secrecy was disturbing. She tried to convince herself that everything could be related to fatigue and work stress, but part of her refused to ignore what she saw in her husband's eyes, a deep conflict, something he was trying to hide from her at all costs. One seemingly quiet night, as James slept beside her, his phone made a soft sound. Samantha, still awake and concerned, reached for the device and saw a message on the screen. The sender was Emily. The message was short, but as heavy as a stone in her chest. How much longer will you hide the truth? Noah deserves to know the truth about his father. Samantha felt her blood turn cold. The name Noah was unfamiliar to her, but the weight of that name and the tone of the message sent a chill down her spine. Noah, James's son. Confused and gripped by shock, Samantha closed her eyes for a moment, trying to absorb the reality unfolding before her. The betrayal was clear, and its impact was devastating, but there was something worse. The fact that her husband had a son with another woman, a child whose existence he had hidden from her all those years. The betrayal wasn't just about an affair, but about the depth of the secret. In the middle of the night, sitting in the darkened room, she felt the truth forming like a huge, crushing shadow. When James woke up, he found Samantha sitting on the edge of the bed, silent, still holding his phone. She looked at him with a coldness he had never seen before, and in a near whisper asked, "Who is Noah?" James's face turned pale. He tried to stammer a response, but the words failed him, his mind gripped by the panic of someone caught in a lie. He knew he could no longer avoid the confrontation. Samantha had discovered the secret he had so feared revealing. With a racing heart and trembling hands, James confessed everything. He revealed his relationship with Emily, the affair he had hidden years ago, the pregnancy, and finally, the existence of Noah, the son he had rejected out of fear of losing Samantha and his reputation. Each word felt like a blow to Samantha, each detail a reminder of the falsehood upon which their marriage had been built. The image of James, the man she had always trusted, crumbled before her like a house of cards. She felt betrayed on every level, wounded by the infidelity, but most of all by the profound and prolonged lie he had sustained all those years. At the end of his confession, Samantha slowly stood up, as if gravity had changed around her. Her breathing was unsteady, and silent tears traced down her face. She didn't scream, didn't lash out. Her silence was sharper than any accusation. The look she gave James carried a mixture of sadness and disillusionment, as if she were facing a stranger, someone she had never truly known. "James, please, I never meant to hurt you," he tried to justify, his voice filled with despair, but she didn't react. The pain was too intense, and his presence only made it worse. In one quick and decisive motion, Samantha grabbed her purse and left without looking back, leaving James surrounded by an overwhelming sense of loss and regret. For days, Samantha remained silent, isolated, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions overwhelming her. In her mind, every detail of their marriage transformed, taking on new meaning in light of the revelation. The man she loved and built a life with was not who she believed. She felt a contained rage, a shattering sorrow, but also a curiosity that gnawed at her. She wanted to understand the story between James and that woman, and to learn how Noah, the innocent boy born of this betrayal, had been raised. Determined to face the truth fully, Samantha made a bold decision. She went to the bakery where Emily worked, seeking answers that only Noah's mother could provide. Upon entering, she felt out of place in that simple environment, where the scent of fresh bread contrasted with the gravity of her intentions. When Emily noticed her presence, she froze, instantly recognizing Samantha and understanding, in a split second, the reason for her visit. Samantha approached her, maintaining a controlled tone of voice but loaded with restrained pain. "I want to talk to you. I want to hear the truth." Emily, though hesitant, knew this moment would come. She knew that the secret she shared with James couldn't last forever, and that Samantha had the right to know the whole truth. With a slight nod, she invited Samantha to sit with her in a quieter corner of the bakery, where they could talk without being overheard. For a few seconds, the two women sat in silence, sizing each other up as if each were searching for answers in the other. Finally, Samantha began, "I need to understand. I need to know who you are and how all this happened. I need to know how my husband, the man I thought I knew, could hide a child, and I want to hear it from you." Emily felt her heart race, the weight of Samantha's words reflecting her own pain. With a trembling but firm voice, Emily told the truth. She spoke about the love she believed existed between her and James, about the promises he made, and the hope she held on to throughout the romance. She described discovering her pregnancy and how, upon revealing it to him, he rejected her with a coldness that still haunted her. Emily recounted the moment she was fired and abandoned, and the pain of having to start over alone in a city where no one knew her. Finally, she spoke of Noah, the cheerful and affectionate boy who, despite never knowing his father, became the center of her world and her reason for strength. Samantha listened in silence, absorbing each word as if they were pieces of a puzzle she needed to complete. She understood, with every detail revealed, that James's wrongdoing was deeper than mere infidelity. It was a betrayal that involved abandoning a child, a calculated choice to protect his reputation and the life he valued so much. Hearing about Emily's suffering and the challenges she had faced, Samantha felt a mix of compassion and sadness, emotions she never thought she'd feel toward the woman who once loved the same man as she did. Finally, after a long silence, Samantha murmured with her eyes fixed on Emily, "He not only destroyed my trust but also the chance to be honest with his own son, and by doing so, he broke a part of all of us." Emily nodded, understanding the weight of that realization. She knew that Noah's presence would bring more pain to everyone, but at the same time, she felt that Samantha deserved the whole truth, even if it cost them a piece they would never know again. That same night, Samantha returned home feeling like a different person. There was something devastating about knowing that the person she had trusted and remained loyal to could lie and betray so deeply. But there was something even more overwhelming in the fact that this betrayal involved an innocent child, someone who had no part in James's selfishness and fear. Sitting alone in the dark living room, Samantha absorbed every detail of what she had discovered. The image of Noah, a boy she had never met but whose life was shaped by James's selfish choice, consumed her. She thought of all the times he had smiled at her, all the gestures of affection and declarations of love, all now seeming to have lost their meaning. When James finally arrived, hesitant and anxious, he found Samantha sitting in the darkness. She was still, like a statue, but her eyes shone with a painful intensity. He knew in that instant that she would never be the same. Samantha looked at him for long moments, letting the weight of silence speak before her words. Finally, she broke the silence, and her voice, firm and calm, carried a pain that transcended anger. "James, I never thought I could feel this. You didn't just destroy my love, but also my trust, the respect I had for you, and the life we built together." James tried to approach, but she raised her hand as if his touch were repulsive. "You lied, James. Not just to me, but to yourself. You denied your own child out of pure fear of losing your status, of tarnishing your reputation." Her words were filled with a sadness he had never heard before. He felt suffocated by the weight of his own guilt, by the bitter memory of a decision that had once seemed necessary. He murmured, almost as an apology, I know I was wrong, Samantha. I didn't know what to do. I was terrified of losing you." But she, relentless, replied, "So you chose to protect your pride, and in doing so, you abandoned not just me, but also an innocent child." The pain on her face was evident, but there was more than just disappointment. There was a strength in Samantha that came from understanding her own position and the power she still had to change the boy's fate. "I loved you, James, but now I see that love is wounded in a way that may never fully heal." With a voice choked with emotion, Samantha finally laid out the difficult decision she had been wrestling with over the past few hours. She looked directly into James's eyes and declared, "I'm going to stay, but not for you. I can't abandon Noah, not after everything I've learned." There was a new determination in Samantha, something he had never seen before. This boy doesn't deserve to live in the shadow of an absent father or under the weight of lies. He deserves to know the love and security you and Emily denied him. And if you still want me by your side, then you'll have to commit to the truth and the transformation it demands." James looked at her, incredulous yet filled with a timid hope. He knew that by agreeing to stay, she offered a chance for him to rebuild what he had destroyed. But he also understood that Samantha would no longer tolerate any form of deceit or selfishness. It was an unspoken ultimatum, and he realized that to maintain his marriage, he would have to shed all masks and commit to winning back her trust day by day. Samantha, determined, approached him and concluded, "I want you to be a real father to Noah, and it's not just about your presence. I want that boy to know that even though you made mistakes, he doesn't have to carry that pain, and I will do this, with or without your help. If you want me to stay, James, commit to rebuilding everything you destroyed." She sighed and added, "I will do what I can to help Noah and Emily. They have suffered enough, and no matter what you think you can make up for now, nothing will be easy." James felt an even heavier burden with these words. He knew that Samantha's staying wasn't a complete reconciliation. It was an opportunity he would have to earn daily. With a choked voice, he promised he would change and would face whatever was necessary to make amends, even if it cost him all the prestige he had fought so hard to build. He was ready to do this, to redeem himself in her eyes and Noah's, but he knew, now more than ever, that the path to regain Samantha's trust and his own peace would be long and painful. After that intense conversation, Samantha decided it was time to act. She sought out Emily and spoke to her frankly, saying she was willing to help Noah have a dignified life, with the presence of a father who would finally take responsibility. Emily, though hesitant, understood that Samantha was sincere, that her desire to help was genuine and free of resentment. Finally, a silent truce arose between the two, and together they decided what was best for Noah's future, laying the groundwork for a new beginning. The months that followed were a true journey of overcoming and transformation for James, Samantha, Emily, and especially Noah. Although the reunion and the revelation of secrets had caused pain, each of them, in their own way, began to realize that the weight of the past could only be eased through forgiveness and the rebuilding of their relationships. James began a difficult process of getting closer to Noah. For a man who had always valued control and the flawless appearance of his life, admitting his mistakes and confronting his own vulnerability was a constant battle. In the first meetings, Noah, unaware of the full truth, was curious and delighted by the friend who had become a regular presence in his life. James, attentive to each word and gesture of the boy, rediscovered in Noah a part of himself he had once rejected, and with each encounter, he felt his guilt diminish as his affection for Noah grew. Emily observed this closeness with a mix of relief and caution. For years she had tried to shield Noah from the pain of having an absent father, and her heart lightened to see that he now had someone who could fill that void. Still, she kept a safe distance, watching from afar to ensure that James didn't disappoint her son. Emily was willing to cooperate, but her heart, scarred from abandonment, still bore deep wounds, and she knew she could never look at James without remembering everything she had endured. Samantha, who also watched everything closely, remained firm in her decision to support Noah, even if the consequences made her question the future of her own marriage. She had decided to stay with James, but she knew their relationship would never be the same. A new reality had emerged, and the love she still felt for him had to withstand the trials of time and past choices. Samantha, with her renewed strength, began to participate in Noah's life, building a relationship of care and respect with the boy, trying to fill a space that she knew James had never fully occupied. The turning point for this new family structure came during a gathering at a city park, where Noah, unaware of the weight of that meeting, played happily under the attentive gaze of his parents and Samantha. It was a moment of peace, a symbol of the new phase they were all willing to build. There, among shared laughs and looks, a subtle but strong bond began to form among them. Regretful and determined to change, James proposed an honest conversation with Noah, in which he would explain who he truly was and reveal his true identity. Prepared for their son's reaction, James and Emily sat with Noah and, gently and carefully, explained that James was his father. Noah's surprised yet thoughtful look reflected the intensity of the moment. He was just a child, but he understood, in his own way, the significance of that revelation. Instead of sadness, Noah smiled, and in an innocent and unexpected gesture hugged James. The boy, without any resentment, welcomed his new father into his life with the purity of a heart that hadn't yet known the weight of abandonment. This simple gesture from Noah was the first step for James, Samantha, and Emily to come together with a common goal: to ensure that Noah grew up surrounded by love and security, regardless of what had happened in the past. Emily and Samantha, who were once on opposite sides, now shared a mutual admiration, forged by the sincerity and respect they both had for Noah's well-being. They learned to see beyond the hurt and trust one another, knowing that together they could give Noah the stability and love he deserved. Over the months, family gatherings became part of their routine. Samantha included Noah in daily activities like picnics, outings, and even family celebrations. For her, seeing the boy's joy was a reminder that life had given her a new purpose, and alongside Emily, they built a friendship based on mutual support and understanding. Although Emily had suffered immensely, she recognized Samantha's commitment to making Noah feel loved, and though the past had left its scars, she felt grateful for Samantha's constant and dedicated presence. James, in turn, continued to build his relationship with his son. He learned to appreciate the little moments, like listening to Noah talk about school or watching him engage in simple activities with genuine enthusiasm. These seemingly ordinary moments held profound meaning for James. He finally understood the value of fatherhood and commitment, and this made each encounter with Noah both a relief and a penance. He knew he had much to make up for, but he was willing to transform himself for his son's sake and the sake of the new family structure they were building. Although Samantha and James's marriage was different, the respect and friendship that emerged between them were genuine and deep. The betrayal and lies left scars, but over time, Samantha realized that love could take different forms and that James's role as Noah's father was now more important than the image of a perfect marriage. The two learned to support each other and work together for Noah's well-being, strengthening a bond that, though no longer one of passionate love, was based on camaraderie and understanding. Emily, who had grown used to self-reliance throughout her life, began to feel a lightness in realizing she was no longer alone in facing the challenges of motherhood. She found in Samantha a true ally, a figure of support who, while never replacing her role as a mother, showed a constant presence in Noah's life that Emily had never imagined. This new family circle brought an unprecedented peace to her life, and over time, she came to feel grateful for the growth of everyone around her. Noah, now surrounded by both his parents and Samantha, blossomed in a happy and secure childhood. He didn't fully understand the complexities of the relationships around him, but his innocence and joy filled the lives of those who loved him with hope. In Noah's eyes, this union was natural and full of love, and he grew up surrounded by the support of a family that grew stronger with each new experience. And so, as time passed, what had initially been a network of conflicts and bitterness transformed into a foundation of support, respect, and acceptance. Each of those involved found their own way to redemption and continued on their path, certain that together they had been able to overcome their mistakes and build a new story. The painful and revealing truth brought with it the power to transform their lives and allowed them to move forward, finally free from the weight of the past. Also, check out the video that's now appearing on the screen. I'm sure this story will touch you and bring a beautiful message of resilience and hope. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to keep up with more amazing stories.